Lovely to meet you all. My name's Janet Garner, and this is...
My name's Ernie Mallen.
And we both work for a group called Commensus over at the University of Central Lancashire. Commensus roughly stands for Community Engagement and Service User Support. I'm the coordinator of the group, so I'm a paid staff coordinator. And Ernie is... You're moving.
I'm moving out of the way.
You're moving behind me.
Out of the screen.
Ernie...
I'm a volunteer. I've been with Commensus is 20 years old next year. And I've been there for 18 years. So I'm a service user and care for a child with cerebral palsy, young man, paranoid schizophrenia, and my own daughter has other issues as well. But I'm also a service user because I have various conditions, shall we say. And every time I get a new one, they go, oh good, you can talk about that as well. Mm-hmm. So why do we do research? That's a good question. I didn't know I was doing research. Let me get that straight from the start. I didn't know we were doing research. We were asked to help Janet in her doctorate. Right away you go.
Okay, so some years ago, I was encouraged. You know, I wasn't busy enough as a full-time worker and a mother of 2 children and everything else that goes on in our life. So I embarked on a professional doctorate, which actually covers a 2-year master's level stage of modules and then convert to a thesis stage after that. So the PARITY group, which is a participatory action research group, was set up in 2020 to help with that research thesis, to look at trying to co-create a tool, a measuring tool, which would examine the impact of our service users and carers being involved in pre-registration nurse education. Now I should say as well that actually while that participatory group was made up of service users and carers from Commensus and myself, during the course of the research obviously we involved students from the university, facilitators of service user involvement at the university, and also educators. So that included lecturers, senior lecturers and managers in the School of Nursing as well. The Commensus group itself, I'm going to let Ernie tell you a little bit more about that.
Right, as I said, we've been going for nearly 20 years. We are involved in all schools within health and social care throughout the university. We have, many years ago, helped set up the School of Medicine. We work from day one on that. We teach social work, we teach nursing, we teach all levels of nursing, we teach mental health, we teach pharmacy, sports science, physiotherapy. We didn't start with all that. We started with nursing and mental health, and we've got bigger and bigger and bigger. So we have about 100 to 120, 150 members. We are involved in research. We're involved in, what else are we involved in? I can't remember.
Lots of different
we do a conference every 2 years, Service User and Care. It's about authenticity in the action. So that's been going for 10 years as well. So we're involved with conferences all over the world. And we've been published a number of times in different nursing magazines, school, medical magazines, pharmacy magazines. So we've been published as well as a group and as individuals. So we have a lot of knowledge. Some of our members are ex-nurses, ex-midwives, pharmacists, physiotherapists, whatever. So
you may have met our colleague, Professor Mick McEwen, who is a professor of democratic mental health, and he actually helped to set up Commensus with other colleagues back in 2004. If you've met Mick, you'll know he's very much a trade union activist. He believes in democracy, in equal rights, and the group itself was set up with 20 members of the community who were leaders in the community and also experts by experience. It's grown since then to over 100 or 120 volunteers who take part, as Ernie says, across 5 different areas. But we're also asked to get involved in lots of different research and publications and conferences, as Ernie mentioned. And so one of those projects is my own project for the doctoral thesis, which was about based in transformative research methodology, and that means inviting people who traditionally have been excluded or marginalised to come up with a research question themselves, be involved in the design, the implementation, every stage of the project, including the dissemination of the work as well. So I'm just going to explain the aims and the rationale, which, as I said, came from the group itself. I reached out initially to the commences group, to those that had been actively involved in the School of Nursing for several years, so they understood some of the terminology, some of the goals of the curriculum, the learning outcomes. They understood the nursing, student nurse journey itself. So the aims were to think about all that the work that they'd been involved in over the years, sharing their lived experience, helping with assessments, helping to interview and recruit students with the right values. What was all of that, what kind of impact was that having on the calibre and the experience of the students going through the programme? So we wanted to speak to key stakeholders, so that obviously included the students, the lecturers, the managers, the service users, the carers that are being involved in teaching and learning. We wanted to look at the already published literature and the grey literature as well, because we were aware there was a lot of that, having organised and attended conferences for a lot of that time. To try and find a gap, obviously, to plough ahead with some research ourselves, to develop the evidence base, to help us guard against, being a victim of all those cuts that were happening at university several years ago. Often, we are, and I know many other groups across the university rely on very short-term funding often. It's very precarious. There's not a lot of money around for some of this work. We ourselves don't actually pay our volunteers. We cover their expenses, we arrange social events, we organise training for them, but we don't actually pay them for their time, which is controversial. So we wanted to explore some of that and actually develop more evidence and more concrete evidence to put our stamp, on the value of our work. So we involved this participatory group of service users and carers in every stage, or I did, I should say. We all worked together, and I'm just going to talk through some of how that happened in practice, and we've got some reflections as well. And finally, we aimed to co-create a measure of impact, which was that final bit of challenge to ourselves. For me, I'm actually an English literature graduate way back when. I haven't got a health degree, I'm not a nurse, I'm not a lecturer, so I wanted to do some of that qualitative exploration, which I'd done in my job as coordinator, but also challenge myself to do a bit more quantitative work as well, and use some of the skills as well that our service users had. So our measure of impact, we wanted to actually think about what impact it was having on the students, all of this lived experience. Was it helping to raise the awareness, challenge the beliefs, change the attitudes of some of the students and the learners? Or was it not really having an effect? We thought it was having an effect, but perhaps it wasn't. We knew that it was some sort of link to the development of skills such as empathy, communication, trust, relationship building, all of that, but we wanted to explore that as well with some of our stakeholders. I've mentioned there were 4 stages, I think. We started, because every doctorate seems to have to start with a literature review or a scoping review of some kind. We opted for a scoping review, but I have to say, in hindsight and during my viva, I was critiqued on whether it was an actual good example of a scoping review, because in terms of the methodology of reporting, what was included and excluded, the level of detail wasn't there that I can actually say it was a scoping review officially. That's my recommendation. But we did a very large exploration of the literature because there's a lot out there and we really wanted to refine it. We then did qualitative interviewing, didn't we?
Yeah, we interviewed student nurses, lecturers, managers, service users and carers. So we tried to cover everybody and everything. There's no point just trying one or two. We needed everybody involved. And it was nice to have the students involved as well.
Yeah, and actually, so we had one person who was involved in the scoping review out of the group of 6, but I think everybody pretty much got involved in the interviewing. So we designed an interview schedule together based on our experiences, but also what had come out of the literature. And we worked through that in a sort of semi-structured interview style, which took probably something between 30 minutes to an hour. We gave everybody the option to take part in either a focus group style interview or an individual interview. Most people opted for the individual interview, though we did do one focus group with a group of Commensus service users as well, and that was quite lively, as you can imagine. The next stage was coming up with an early draft of an impact tool, and what that looks like, it's a survey of questions and statements based on the themes that came out from those early stages. And the final stage is preliminary testing using all those big SPSS statistical packages, which I'll touch on later. Ernie, I'd like to just talk about your experiences in some of the group as well.
We all wanted to do it because we wanted to be involved with James doctorate. That's why we started it. Everybody started out really well. We all have previous experience in doing research because we've worked with Professor Mick before, and we worked with other people within the university and within research and the medical school as well. But the more into it you got, you could see people dropping out. But the core group carried on. I don't know when you want to mention this now, but there were some issues of why people didn't stay on together. And we involved working with everybody. Everybody talked together. Everybody contributed to everything. And the most important thing, I think, for me as a service user in CUR, being involved in research, when we start research, we're asked to start research within the university. And you start it, you put your effort into the research project, and then it's thank you very much, goodbye. I don't know how you academics feel about that, because I'm not an academic. Never will, but never have been. But I know if I put something into that, I want to see the end result. And we don't always see this. So we've seen that. We also seen this as an opportunity of working all the way through and seeing the end result, hopefully, at the end of it. So that's one reason we kept going, because we want to see everything done right. So these are the barriers. It was COVID for a start. That arrived, so lack of technology, couldn't talk to people properly, because with the teams just starting up and everybody trying to get used to it, training, everything had to be done through computers online. If you didn't have a computer, you had to arrange for a computer, you had to arrange for internet, so that was really difficult, I think, for everybody at that time. I don't know what your universities felt like at that time when it first started, but I know our service users struggled a lot with that. But everything, the interviews had to be conducted online, the meetings, and then the coding and data had to be done remotely too. And we were learning coding at that time.
We were all learning together, I have to say.
It was fun.
And it was fun. And it kept us occupied, didn't it, during the pandemic?
Yeah, it gave us something to do. But also on that as well, we were actually at that same time teaching online to students. So that was another experience as well, but we'll get into that. But pandemic carried on, so I think people started to drop out a bit.
Yeah.
And myself included, some of our members have physical disabilities. Being hunched over a computer don't help. So a lot of us dropped out for that.
We learned a lot along the way, obviously, and hopefully there's a whole paper to be published there about our experiences during the pandemic of participatory group practice, because it was very difficult at times. There was a period where suddenly the university reopened, I think, in the autumn of 2021, and we were like, fantastic, biscuits, chocolate, back in there, let's get messy in the classroom and sort through some of those codes. We managed 3 meetings doing that, and then suddenly back in lockdown again. So it was very challenging. But we did learn that actually interviews could be conducted very well, and actually we could reach some people that may have not been reached in the past, and actually got around that lack of funding issue. This is just a picture of a visual desk at home where you're trying to find your space to work, aren't you, and do all your coding and data analysis, but the cat's in the way and the plants are in the way, and your husband's dumped all his computer and all his books in your workspace, and you're trying to figure it all out. So, findings, mustn't forget findings. I'm not sure how much you know about service user and carer involvement in education, but there is a lot of literature out there. And a lot of the literature, as you would expect, is exploring the experiences of people, of different stakeholders, so lecturers, patients, service users, and learners. Everybody reports positive benefits, enhanced feelings of empathy, people's lived experiences staying with learners for a long time, enhanced relationships with educators and service users, trust developing, all of those things. But there are also challenges and barriers reported relating to the culture of our universities, the lack of a level playing field, issues of power, lack of democracy, all of that. There are a lot of things to consider when you're involving people in education and in research. There are some theories cited, which include things like transformative learning theory, Mesereau, I haven't put references on here, I'm just noticing, activity theory and socio-cultural theory. That idea of actually, for learning to happen, deep emotional learning, there has to be a sort of challenge to somebody's personal beliefs and a transformation to happen. And maybe that was a quintessential moment that we wanted to capture really. People had tried to evaluate impact in a qualitative way, but also more recently, I would say since about 2017, 2018, had a go at evaluating things in a quantitative way, in measuring attitudes. And the gap we did identify that was no studies that had involved a group of service users and carers throughout. So we thought, okay, let's go for that. I'm not sure how I'm doing for time. Am I taking too long?
No.
We'll speed up a bit.
Touch the 20-minute mark.
Okay. So interviewing, as you can imagine, we conducted 24 interviews, as Ernie's mentioned. This is how we did it really. We talked about it, we looked at a couple of transcripts together. Initially, I was having to type up all these transcripts, but then suddenly Teams developed that fabulous thing where it created it for you. You had to do a bit of gobbledygook and decoding some of those, but yeah. So we got together and sort of wrote our codes on a post-it or a virtual post-it and sorted through them in that way. We then used some sort of framework analysis where we had a big spreadsheet and we copied, quotations and examples into that. And these are the themes that we developed overall. I won't go through them all. Hopefully you can see those. There are things in there about it being real life, human voices and authentic. This is important. The impact on the service user and carer themselves, giving people back their feeling of self-worth, of value, of contributing to society, some people, of recovery as well. People developing students' key skills, adapting to different modes of delivery that came out because of the pandemic. Co-production, we wanted to call that was a direct quote, with you, not to you. How do we measure impact and so on. Bridging the theory-practice gap as well. Do you want to talk about this?
No.
I feel like I'm doing lots of talking here.
No.
No.
I go,
So,
you're the academic.
the actual, the magic of quantitative tool design is using those themes really, and this was a really enjoyable part for me, and I think most of the group as well. It's taking those themes and those examples from the transcripts and turning those into a measure of impact. Okay, so for each theme, what we did is, okay, we've got a theme of overcoming stigma and prejudice. That's what we called it. Challenging preconceptions,
Preconceived.
about
Preconceived
preconceptions, and using some quotes from that to create statements. Okay, so you can have positive statements and you can have negative statements. This is a negative statement. So the way you score things, I don't know if you've created something like this yourself, changes if it's negative or positive on a Likert scale. Okay, so we would get each theme and together we would write statements and test them out on each other to see if they made sense. Once we'd got 3 or 4 under each theme, we then created this first draft and we did some cognitive testing with students and learners to test their understanding, to see if things made sense, to tweak the wording as well. Initially we had 33 statements and we reduced that further to 23 following some early testing. I've just put some principles of tool development on there. So thankfully, during the second stage of this process, I gained another supervisor from the School of Psychology who was really helpful, Professor Janice Abbott, who taught me through how, the holy grail of developing a tool. You needed to look at this US FDA guidance, which is all about actually, and it was a revelation to me. The fundamentals of it was patient involvement in the early stages. So I thought, oh phew, I've got that right. So people are consulted, for these patient-reported outcome measures and experience measures. You've got to sort of thrash out the challenges and difficulties of measuring a concept such as professionalism or a change of attitude. You've got to try and use multiple questions to find your way to an understanding of each concept, and then use software to examine the correlation between each item. Service users and carers from the group all help to write the questions, as I've said, and tweak them as well, and interview the students to check their understanding. And then finally, we conduct something called principal components analysis, which is a type of factor analysis to test the correlation and the validity of each scale. So finally, I think this is my final slide, almost. This work isn't complete yet. I was told to stop there because I'd done enough for a doctorate at that point, and I was examined and successful earlier this year. So my plans for postdoc research really is to get some funding so I can start paying people for their time and their involvement.
Money.
Fundamentally, yeah. There is further scope, obviously, for testing, just to refine the tool, to test it. So we've only tested it. I'm anticipating a question here at UCLan at the moment with the pre-reg nurses. It'd be nice to test it with other cohorts as well. You've got to get larger and larger samples to refine the scale as well. I know I'm just looking at Layla's offer to test it for me as well in the future within Lancashire and South Cumbria Trust. That would be amazing. So some of the limitations, obviously it was quite a small scale study at one university, obviously. We were aware that, because we'd been involved with commensals doing this work, we were clearly biased, while we tried to use sort of inductive thematic analysis throughout. We have to acknowledge our inherent bias because we believe it works already. We're not objective researchers, are we? We do need more representative and larger sample sizes. Once the work is published, you'll see that the samples of students that did come forward were the more mature students. There was a gap in the 18 to 30 sort of age group, and maybe those that did come forward, inherently believed in it already. So I wonder if a more sort of random sample would be beneficial. We came up with a lot of resistance, didn't we, to this thesis proposal initially. The idea of measuring impact in a sort of mathematical way, was that really invalidating all the good work that people had done in the past?
Well, we've got to believe what we're doing is making better healthcare professionals for the future. Otherwise, what's the point? And we all our members believe that. And say I've been there 18 years. Some of our members have been longer than me, but everybody that comes along believes in what they're doing. I think the nicest thing out of it, although it's not research, it's not figures, is when a nurse comes to you and say, I remember you 5 years on, 10 years on.
Yeah,
So then you know you are making a difference.
absolutely. So finally, I've just gathered some reflections from the PARITY group, some positive and negative ones. So I'll let you just have a look at those for a second. And that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for listening.
You can answer all the questions.
No.
Just remind me, so what does the questionnaire measure?
So the questionnaire, at the moment, what we're hoping to capture on the scales is an accurate portrayal of their sentiment at that time. So what I'm hoping to do is, once that measure is tested for robustly for internal and external validity, so that it's measuring what it's supposed to be measuring, that means, we hope to do it before and after a series of sessions, so that it will measure somebody's change in their beliefs about service users and carers.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I was also interested because some of the items you showed us seem to be very similar to other
Yes.
attitudinal scales, like
Yes.
mental illness scale.
Yes. Yes.
So,
So there is some similarity, and actually, as part of the thesis, what I've created is a table, because there are some other very similar measures which are measuring attitudes, which are measuring empathy, so Jefferson scale of empathy, and there are similarities in that. So this is different in that it's been created throughout systematically with service users and carers involved. So that's the thesis, and hopefully that makes it more robust and more authentic to our premise.
so then you're going to have a product, like an online course that people can go on and then to measure themselves and then do the course and measure afterwards. Is that your end?
We have thought about that. We have thought about it.
Otherwise, you're only measuring that session,
Yeah.
aren't you? But I think that
Yeah,
for wider scope, it's having some
sort of
we're here doing,
standardised product as well.
yeah, we're doing an equity accomplice training at the moment here, which is nice. Nice program of helping us recognise cultural differences. And that's a strong program that's been. And it's but how do you measure? We haven't got, we're doing it, but not necessarily measuring the outcome. The outcome is how you feel about it and how other people's behaviours change.
Well, we capture qualitative feedback, don't we? But we're not.
Quite inspired by the acronym PIMS. It's sort of a summer.
PIMS, yeah.
PIMS.
Must have been a summer name.
I think when we started it,
PARITY and PEPMED.
we as service users carers, we actually thought, how do we approach post-reg nursing and ask them how they dealt with us, how they learned from us, and have they learned anything from us?
Yeah.
But it's having to get them back into the university again.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the difficult part of the next session.
Got you.
That's the next project, I think.
Yeah.
There are lots of them. There are lots of ideas, aren't there? Anybody else?
What will be your intended sample then with your question?
So I think probably what we were thinking about initially was something to create evidence really for our managers. I think we were going through a period of time when there were lots of cuts, as I said, austerity was going on. We were nervous about being sidelined or reduced or diminished in some way. People could just took a video off the internet and call that service user involvement, potentially, So it was, sorry, original question. What was it? The sample. So obviously because we're, I've moved away from the microphone. Our sample will be the student nurses that we work with on a daily, weekly basis, so that we're collecting evidence. It might be one session, but ideally it would be more systematic sessions across a module. So we're very heavily involved in creating and developing the so that people are designing the curriculum, they're assessing the students at the end of the curriculum, but they're also measuring or attempting to measure a change in their attitudes and beliefs towards people. There's a lot of negativity around that still for some learners about people.
How would you control for the other influences then in this?
I'm not sure about that. I have to acknowledge I can't control for that. What you can do is you can do some retest validity, so that you're sort of isolating that group, and you might have to do that in terms of a short period of time. Yeah, but obviously you can't control it in that purely scientific way. There are external influences happening all the time. Yeah.
Is there anything else that you would like to measure?
So what are you thinking of?
So kind of beyond this type of work has much broader influence other than attitude, comm skills, procedural skills. Yeah. And I just wondered whether there was anything else you would like to include in the measure if you create a huge measure.
It's a huge measure. Well, you've got to be very careful with measure that doesn't become too huge. So there's obviously lots of different rules about, the maximum size of it, the length of time it takes, whether you introduce, a qualitative, open-ended item at the end as well, things like that. The number of positive to the number of negative. So I think for us, we do acknowledge, because it's not always about that sort of active sharing of lived experience, is it? Ernie and others do a lot of role play. That's practicing of communication skills. Development of empathy, dealing with difficult people, perhaps something like that. Could be measured as well. Confidence in themselves, and becoming more assured.
Thanks both of you.
Thank you.
Okay, quick break. Slightly less of a break than we thought, but a quick break. No.